Well, I think I wouldn't put your electronic media in that category, because I actually think you do try to objectively have discourse and pass on information so people can make their own judgment. I mean, after all, you took my inauguration address and let people see it for what it was worth. I noticed you did put it on quite late at night, which probably was a chance for the insomniacs to sleep for the first time. I think one of the problems we have in the world of soundbite, coupled with the fact that we have a plethora of stations now that must fill their airtime with babble, does create an environment in which the juiciest tidbit is that which tends to kind of emerge out of the gossip. And I think what Johnny's saying is that gossip is now fact in people's minds, and it's a sad state. And I can understand. I appreciate his blowing the whistle on what is taking place. I'm treated with respect. People know, in Texas, know that when I put my hand on the Bible, I swore to uphold the laws of the state, but I also swore to uphold the dignity of the office, and I have done so. And the reporters here know I've done so.
But why is it this kind of a world exists on a national basis but doesn't on a statewide basis?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I guess because Washington has gotten to the point now where there's no bounds. There's just too many channels with too many people who've got to express too many opinions, I guess.
But as you sit down here in Texas and look at Washington, can that be changed up there?
Well, first of all, I sit down here in Texas and I ignore most of it. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings up in Washington, but I don't channel surf trying to find out who's hollering the loudest. And I really do ignore most of what goes on the airways from up there.
Do you find that others you're around do the same thing?
Absolutely. You bet. I mean,
so is Washington talking to itself?
I don't know about that, but I think a lot of people are sick of it, and they just don't tune in. And as I say, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings who think people care, but a lot of people don't.
Education,
you bet.
Social Security, Medicare, and a couple of others. But go to education. What role should the federal government play in education?
Well, first of all, people are right about education. I mean, it is the biggest issue, particularly since we're prosperous. If we weren't prosperous, the biggest issue, of course, would be where am I going to get my next paycheck from? If we were at war, the next issue would be, can we win the war? Or let's don't go to war. And in times of peace and prosperity, education is the issue. And so people are right when they say that. It is somewhat oxymoronic for a Republican and a person who believes strongly in local control of schools to utter, to talk about the role of the federal government in education. Here's the way I like to put it. So long as the Congress wants to spend money, the money ought to be block granted to states. The money ought not to have strings. The money ought not to be a way for the federal government to govern the way states run their schools, because what that ends up doing is it really does end up interrupting the flow of power from the state to the local authorities. And what's important to have educational excellence is this, and my judgment, of course, is for the state to set clear and understandable goals. A few goals that will change Texas, like excellence in English, math, science, and social science. The state's role is to measure. The state's role is to put an accountability system in place and say, we're going to test you to determine whether or not you're meeting the goals. But it is not the state's role to interrupt authority and responsibility. The state's role is to assign authority and responsibility at the local level, is to say to people, you chart the path to excellence. Because what ends up happening is if you interrupt authority or that interconnect, people say, well, we would have done it differently, Governor, except you made us do this, or this was you demanded this, or you mandated this program. And so local control of schools, in my judgment, is the only way to do two things. One is to chart the short-term path to excellence in schools, but it's also going to be the way to receive what's ultimately is going to happen in education, and that's this influx of amazing technologies. That's literally going to change the way education is delivered and the way children learn.
Are you on the internet?
Absolutely.
You personally use the internet?
Yes, I do.
What for?
Well, last night my daughters were reading an Emily Dickinson poem, and they got stuck on a few words in the poem, "To Hear the Oriole," I think is the beginning lines. And so I got on the internet trying to find out if there was a chat page or chat room, not chat page, chat room for them to be able to ask some professor to interpret the line for them in the Emily Dickinson poem. There is an idea. I'm on email a lot. I email back and forth to ex-President Bush. I I believe that email is going to be the most efficient way to transfer policy, opinion, press, just to communicate rapidly within a structure such as a presidential campaign or a governor's office or a governor's campaign.
Does he email you back, by the way?
Oh yeah, he does. He's
your mom?
pretty literate. Mom's on there as well. Yeah, believe it or not, she's high tech. She may not look high tech, but she's high tech.
How much?
We have got. Let's see. We've got 3 million. It's about 300,000.
Does the Texas Educational Association support you?
There are 4 different agencies, 4 different groups, and one of them was very supportive. One of them was neutral. 2 of them were not very supportive.
If you could tell the federal...
But that's okay. By the way, a lot of the teachers were for me. Their leaders weren't necessarily for me. And incredibly enough, this may come as a shock to you, I still try to meet with them to listen to what their concerns are. Yeah, the NEA group was not for me.
If you were to
well, first of all, we get about 6.5% of our budgets from the federal government, so it's not a huge presence.
But those have guidelines, though, don't they?
Yeah, they do. There's a lot of guidelines. There's Title IX, and
you feel they're
well, it's
intrusive,
hard.
the federal government?
It's paperwork. It's strings. It's compliance. It's all this stuff that swirls around that's attendant with. But receiving $1, you know, 1/10 of the budget. And so I guess the best thing, as I say, block grants, monies that would come down without strings. Right early in my administration, the Clinton administration talked to us about receiving Goals 2000 money. I said, no, we're not going to take your Goals 2000 money. It's too many strings. I can't cite you the strings. I was just told there's too many strings, and so I said no. And they turned around and said, okay, fine, well, since you're a big state, we'll give you what's called EdFlex money. We'll send you money down on an annual basis without any strings attached to it. You use it the way you want to. And we said, well, we're going to designate it to reading. And one of the things we designated it for was teacher training. There's a wonderful place in Houston called the Nyhouse Institute that was initially set up to train dyslexic children on how to read. Well, they have become a source of teacher training for us in Texas. And we gave grants to different local school districts to get their teachers retrained in the science of reading, i.e. phonics, to teach children how to read. And it's been a great program. And amazing, and interestingly enough, the test scores where the teachers have been retrained in the science of reading have started to head off the charts. And so there's an example of where block granting can come in handy for states to focus on specific projects that'll lead to what I hope everybody wants, which is educational excellence.
Somebody they were looking at.
Yeah, I was shocked. So were you.
When did it happen?
I can't remember the exact moment, but when they first, I can remember sitting in my office and my press secretary, Karen Hughes, came and said, you're not going to believe this. You lead the polls. I said, you got to be kidding me. I don't even want my name mentioned in the polls. He said, no, you're the leader.
This is the first time you've ever thought about this. I mean, it was...
Yeah, I never really ran for... I mean, Brian, this may come as a shock to you. I didn't wake up at 15 saying, I want to do everything I can to be president.
No, but a poll, I mean, people complain about polls all the time, so the poll did this.
Well, the poll said something. It was, yeah, it wasn't that poll. It's every poll since then. I mean, it flabbergasted me.
When did it happen? Do you remember?
I think it was right. No, I can't remember exactly when. I probably after the '96 elections, probably a year after the '96 elections, sometime in '97, late '97, I suspect. I have to go back and look, but it's.
Are you tired of answering the question?
No, I mean, listen, because I brought it on myself. There's one way not to answer the question. So I'm not running. And so I understand the reality of the situation. I'm interested. I'm thinking about it. But if I were that sick of it, all I'd have to say is, Brian, I'm not running. And that would end, and then I'd have to answer the question why for about a month, and then they'd leave me alone. They'd be out there chasing after everybody else.
Well, let me just put this hypothesis. It couldn't get any better. 69% popular as a governor. You won the election. You're what? 87% approval rating in the state.
Right.
You're leading the polls on a national basis for the Republican Party. I mean,
why risk it?
Yeah, it's the only place to go is down.
Well, that's not why you run for political office in the first place. You run for a reason. I ran for a reason in Texas. I want to improve our schools and improve the welfare system. I want to change the tort laws of Texas. I want entrepreneurship to flourish.
Well, let's go back over those quickly.
So therefore, okay, go ahead.
Go over the tort. Have you changed the tort laws?
Absolutely. Signed 6 pieces of major legislation that changed Texas from plaintiff, trial lawyer heaven to a state of reasonable criminal justice.
How about on the welfare?
We've reduced the rolls by half. We've substantially changed the welfare rolls. In my state of the state, there's going to be some needed additional reforms. I'll tell you an interesting idea. We want to fund group homes for unwed teenage mothers, to take mother and child out of the environments in which they live. We're going to call them second chance homes, to give these young girls a second chance to realize there's a better way than by having babies out of wedlock, for example. Help them get educated. But there's more welfare reform to be done. We had a substantial welfare package. Juvenile justice reform, we completely rewrote the Juvenile Justice Code in 1995. It was as if there was no juvenile justice law. I mean, the laws used to say, little fella, you've committed a crime. It's really not your fault. It's our fault. We're sorry. And we're not going to do anything to help you. And now we've got a near seamless system where we've got facilities and after-school programs and schools within schools, and we've made a difference. I've made a difference. The legislature's made a difference. The whole system is making a difference in saying we're going to hold you accountable for bad behavior. In the education world, when I went to schools here in Texas, we went under what's called the Gilmer-Aiken Bill, written in 1948. I had the pleasure of signing the Ratliff-Sadler Bill in Henderson, Texas, that will be the paradigm for the next 50 years in public education. We got a charter school movement that's flourishing. We've got public school choice. I'm going to ask for vouchers in the next state of the state because I think it's going to improve public schools. No, we make great. I got a good record.
We only got 3 minutes left. Let's go back to we talked about the speaking thing. Are you worried that you find yourself on a stage with 17 candidates?
And they never get a word in edgewise?
Or, I mean, are you prepared for a long, debate kind of situation where you're having to slug it out and they're already attacking you?
Well, I saw that. That's fine. I mean, that's not my style. I campaign talking about what's in my heart and what I believe. And if I choose to run for president, I'll be laying out the reasons why I'm running. And if people want to talk about me, they can do that. I think they do so with a risk, because I think Americans are sick and tired of slash and burn politics.
Indianapolis, when you went there to speak, as you know, you got some criticism afterwards. You got some critique of the speech.
I thought I was brilliant.
But did you learn anything from that?
Don't speak in a hall that's not conducive to being able to connect with an audience.
How do you do that, though? How do you protect yourself?
Well, we have better advance. It was a hard hall to speak in. Look, I thought it was a fine speech. A lot of people there thought it was a pretty good speech. I got criticized by the National Press Corps. It might have been because I didn't hold a press conference after it was over. But that's okay. Listen, I'm going to get criticized a lot. And I think your question is, is your skin thick enough? I think that's the right question. And the answer is, you bet it is. Absolutely. Texas politics is pretty tough. And when you've run statewide in this state twice, I think you get a pretty good lesson about what big-time politics are all about.
Where do you think you'd be the most vulnerable if you ran?
If I ran for president?
Yep.
If I run for president, I'm not going to be vulnerable in my desire, I'll tell you that. I will have the appropriate fire in the belly. But I don't know. We'll let the pundits figure that out.
When do you have the best time in politics? Wait, tell us the moment when you say, this is why I got in this.
Going to the little elementary school today with the senator and the House chairman, and seeing the kids react and being able to talk a message of values. I mean, stay in school. Don't do dope. Don't be using alcohol. Go to college. Just calling on the best of Texas. I think that's probably the most fulfilling moments. I believe, for example, the best welfare program is one that uses church and synagogue and Muslim and faith-based organizations. And I remind people, if you're one of these voices calling for changing the welfare system, you have the responsibility to step up and help a neighbor in need. And I love calling on the best of our citizens in the state of Texas.
Last question. Would you rather be referred to as Governor, as George, as W, or anything else? What's the name you like the most?
Dad. It's the most meaningful name, and it's the most important job I'll ever have.
Governors, thank you.
You bet.